The issue of consciousness and phenomena, or the relationship between mind and matter, is one of the most debated topics in philosophy. It is a fundamental question not only in philosophy but also in neuroscience, psychology, and many other fields. The central question of this issue is, how can we explain the existence of consciousness and the relationship between consciousness and the material world we experience? Throughout the history of philosophy, there have been two main schools of thought regarding this issue. One is materialism, which holds that consciousness is a product of the physical processes in the brain. The other is idealism, which posits that there is a separation between the material world and consciousness. The key questions surrounding this issue include, can consciousness be fully explained through neuroscience? Or does it have a distinct nature that modern science cannot access? This essay will explore the major theories of consciousness and phenomena in philosophy and analyze the debates surrounding them. Specifically, the essay will focus on the viewpoints of two major philosophical schools, materialism and idealism, as well as the challenges each of these schools faces in addressing the issue of consciousness. In philosophy, consciousness is commonly understood as the ability to perceive, feel, and think about the world, as well as oneself. It is the subjective experience we have when we interact with the world around us. Phenomena, in the philosophical context, refers to how the material world appears to us through our senses and cognition. The crucial issue in the philosophy of consciousness and phenomena is the distinction between subject and object. The subject is the perceiving individual, while the object is the external world that the subject experiences. This relationship between subject and object is clearly illustrated in many different philosophical theories. First is materialism. Materialism is the school of thought that holds that the material world is the only basis for reality, and all phenomena, including consciousness, can be fully explained through physical processes. According to materialism, the brain is the origin of consciousness, and our conscious experiences are simply the result of neural activity and chemical processes in the brain. Modern materialist philosophers, especially in the field of neuroscience, such as Daniel Dennett, Richard Dawkins, and Patricia Churchland, argue that consciousness can and will be explained through advances in neuroscience. Dennett, in his book Consciousness Explained, argues that consciousness is not something mystical or immaterial but is instead a complex process of information processing in the brain. He asserts that consciousness is the outcome of the brain organizing and processing information from the senses, and there is nothing mysterious about it. Materialism generally opposes idealism, asserting that there is no something immaterial that can exist independently of matter. For materialists, all states of consciousness can be described as physical processes in the brain. When a person experiences a sensation or a thought, the neural activities in the brain are the direct cause of those experiences. The second is idealism. In contrast to materialism, idealism is the school of thought that holds that the world is not merely material but also has an immaterial element, consciousness. Philosophers such as René Descartes, George Berkeley, and Immanuel Kant have argued that consciousness has a nature distinct from the material world and can exist independently of it. René Descartes, in his work Meditations on First Philosophy, famously said, "Cogito, ergo sum, I think, therefore I am." He argued that consciousness, or the ability to think, is a fundamental feature of human nature. Descartes proposed that the mind and the body are two distinct entities, dualism, and their relationship is a complex problem. According to Descartes, the mind, or soul, is an immaterial entity, while the body and the material world are governed by physical laws. George Berkeley, an influential idealist philosopher, argued that matter does not exist independently of consciousness. He claimed that everything exists only insofar as it is perceived by a mind. According to Berkeley, consciousness is the foundational element of reality, and the material world exists only as a collection of ideas in the mind. Immanuel Kant, one of the greatest philosophers in modern philosophy, offered a profound view of the relationship between consciousness and the world. Kant argued that we cannot access reality as it truly is, noumenon, but only as phenomena, i.e., the world as we perceive and understand it. Consciousness, according to Kant, plays an essential role in structuring and creating the world we experience. Next is property dualism. Property dualism is a school of thought that stands between materialism and idealism. According to this view, there is a distinction between the mental and the physical, but the mental is not an entirely separate entity. It is simply a unique property of physical processes in the brain. One of the prominent theories in property dualism is David Chalmers' theory of emergent properties. David Chalmers is one of the leading contemporary philosophers studying consciousness. He distinguishes between the easy problems and the hard problems of consciousness. Easy problems are those that can be explained through science, such as how the brain processes information or how sensory organs work. The hard problem, however, concerns the why of consciousness. Why do we have subjective experiences? Or why do we have a feeling of experiencing something? This is the question about the nature of consciousness that science has yet to answer fully. Finally, there is the emergentism. Emergentism posits that consciousness is a property that arises from the complex interactions of material elements in the brain. According to this theory, when neural cells and brain processes reach a certain level of complexity, they give rise to a new phenomenon, consciousness. However, this property cannot be predicted from the characteristics of individual elements, meaning that consciousness cannot be fully explained through physics or simple neural processes. This theory suggests that consciousness might be an emergent phenomenon that arises from complex physical processes but cannot be fully understood through current physical sciences. It emphasizes the importance of complexity in the formation of consciousness. Although many theories of consciousness exist, the issue remains highly controversial. Some issues and questions still lack satisfying answers, particularly the question of why physical processes in the brain lead to subjective experiences, sensations, and consciousness. One of the most significant debates is the hard problem of consciousness, the question of why we have subjective experiences of the world. For example, when a person listens to a piece of music, they do not simply perceive the sound but also have a feeling about the music. Why does a simple physical process lead to that kind of experiential feeling? This is a question that both scientists and philosophers have yet to fully address. Some argue that with advances in neuroscience, we will eventually be able to explain consciousness fully through physical processes in the brain. However, philosophers like Chalmers and Thomas Metzinger argue that consciousness might be an inexplicable phenomenon that cannot be fully captured by current scientific methods. While we may understand the physical factors involved in consciousness, the subjective nature of consciousness may always remain a mystery. The issue of consciousness and phenomena is one of the central problems in philosophy and modern science. Although there are many different theories, from materialism to idealism and various hybrid schools of thought, the question of the relationship between matter and mind, as well as the nature of subjective experience, remains a major challenge for humanity. Materialist, idealist, and emergentist theories all present compelling arguments, but they also face significant challenges and controversies. The development of neuroscience and philosophy will continue to contribute to finding solutions to this issue. However, it can be said that the problem of consciousness and phenomena will always remain one of the greatest questions in the history of philosophy and science. What do you all think? Thank you for accompanying. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment below so we can discuss. Wish you and your family good health.